Hey everyone. Now, I keep getting asked about various different types of radio setups and plate carriers, and I think it would be really helpful to actually add on to a video that Hop recently did. Today we'll be looking at some basic radio setups and comparing them to some high-end radio setups that you may have seen out in the wild. And hopefully, I'll remove some of the mystery with all the comms and everything, and then help you put together a setup that meets your needs. All right, let's go. Now, as I said earlier, Hop actually already did a video, which I'll link somewhere over here, I don't know, where he actually dove into the details of some of the differences between budget and Gucci comms. And it was a wonderful video, as he spent most of his time just making fun of Pharaoh, which is a little bit hilarious. In his video, he also mentioned quite a few products, such as Disco 32s, PTTs. And since he did such a good job bashing an Instagram plate carrier, I figured I could do him a solid and expand on his video and add a little bit more information. Now, this video is centered around comms with loud noises and plate carrier or chest rig integration. So then, depending on your needs, if you don't need that gear, then obviously you can scale some of this down, and all of my notes about Ear Pro just may not apply to your situation. Also, these are my experiences with radios, and I am not the grand poobah of radio things, nor am I some level 100 wizard. I'm taking a look at this gear as a normal consumer like you that really has no knowledge about it and is just trying to learn, and I want to show you what works, what doesn't, and what's worth your money. If you're military or Leo, you're probably going to get stuff issued to you, and just use that. So if you're some high-tier special forces guy looking for help on radios, on YouTube, and you've stumbled across my channel, well, I welcome you, but you may be in the wrong place. So moving forward, I want you guys to all know that the value here is not how fancy your setup is, but how you use it. Without even a basic knowledge of wavelengths and how they perform over long distances or in urban environments, your fancy pants little setup will be completely useless, no matter how much you spend. And radio discipline is a big thing, particularly in escape, evasion, or general harassment of opposing forces. And remember, even a fancy radio with encryption and all the whiz-bangs will give away your position just as easily as a crappy radio. So let's start with the super basic setups, and we'll work our way up to the more complex stuff. And we'll go over each setup itself, like how to put it all together, and then I'll show you the pros and cons of each setup. And some foreshadowing for the end, why it doesn't really matter. And then finally, I'll tell you which one of these setups I recommend for those of you out there in like your normal daily usage that aren't trying to like increase your wizarding levels. Yeah, Base, this is Wizard 1. How do I cast lightning bolt with this thing?
How do you do what?
I said, how do you cast lightning bolt? Lightning bolt! And I'm going to show you how to integrate all of these setups into the same basic radio, a Beofeng. Because anyone can get this for a low cost. And it's a great place to start, because then you can grow into like HF and all the other cool stuff. And as we get into the more complicated setups, I'll show you some of the other radios that we could sub into those setups if you wanted to take it up a level. But I highly recommend you start here. Learn what you're doing and outgrow the radio. Starting with the $20 radio and not loving it is fine. Starting with a $200 radio and not being into ham, that's just fallen into like internet ham FUD lore that one radio really works that much better than the other, or 5 times the cost anyway. But anyway, let's get into our most basic setup, just a radio. Here we have just a basic radio, a Baofang UV-5R. The radio itself is pretty awful to program without a programming cable, and setting it up in the field or in a pinch would be very difficult. And I know you guys keep asking me for this, and I will. I'll show you how to set all this up, and you'll use a program called Chirp and a programming cable. With those, you can pull down FRS, GMRS, Maritime, local repeaters, and a ton of other pre-programmed channels straight from the app to get this radio running in under 5 minutes. Now, looking at how we would use this setup on our plate carrier, the radio can just go in a pouch. It works, and you can hear what people are saying. Sort of. Please upgrade the antenna this comes with. It is absolutely horrible. Those Amazon Ambry antennas, fine, whatever, whatever. It's better than this anyway.
Squiggle scarls in the Charles, market miles, bigger bars, spark balls.
Repeat? And in this configuration, you could just take your radio out and reply, but it's certainly not ideal. I do run a DMR radio like this on my first line gear as a small emergency radio that is tied into national and regional channels that can monitor larger areas over the digital wavelengths. So what are the pros of this setup? Well, it's not complicated and it's super budget friendly. It's nothing amazing, just a radio in a pouch. It doesn't break the bank, but it does greatly expand your comm capability for whoever you're working with. You can even track individuals using encrypted signals with a simple radio like this if you're pretty savvy. But what are some of the cons of a setup like this? Well, it's not very easy to use and it's certainly not convenient. Having the radio just jammed in a pouch means most transmissions will be broken or muffled. You want pizza hats? And every time you want to talk, you have to take your radio out and key the mic. This becomes increasingly burdensome if you're holding a firearm also. And everyone everywhere can hear both sides of all of your conversations. It's certainly not ideal. So let's take this setup up a level. For the next setup, we add a basic earpiece and microphone setup, but not the earpiece and mic combo that comes with the standard Beofeng. It's really bad, and it completely smashes your ear when you put any sort of ear pro on top of this. So, as with the antenna, get literally anything except for this. For this setup, we have something similar to what Hop had in his video, with the basic push-button mic. For these, you can just connect the correct pin connections into the side of the radio, and then you route the mic and cables through your carrier. Some carriers and placards are more accommodating than others for comm, so look at your carrier and plan for how you're going to route everything before you get started, so you don't end up with just like a bird's nest of junk. Completing this setup is the small earpiece that you can then place in your ear and under your ear pro. So this whole setup isn't fantastic, but it works. I have independent volume control on my headset and on my radio, and everyone around me can't hear everything that my team is saying. But I definitely need a better antenna solution. Let's solve that right now. I use the CAAtail antenna that can be woven in and out of the carrier to provide an antenna solution that can be removed via a QD attachment. So then you can actually remove your radio by taking off the QD attachment and then just disconnecting all your pins, but then all of your comm equipment and all of your antenna all stay in place on the carrier. And then we can revert back to our basic configuration of just a radio and swap between these two comm setups easily. So what are our pros and cons in this setup? Well, it's a lot more discreet because not everybody can hear you, and it's certainly a lot more usable. This is a much better upgrade in your comm setup, so everyone around you can't hear everything your entire team is saying. Plus, you have much clearer comms because you're not listening to all the radio signals just through a pouch. And when using a firearm, you can easily use the PTT to talk to your teammates much quicker and easier. But cons. These little microphones usually suck pretty bad, and this whole system is piecemeal, and it usually resorts in wires and stuff just all over the place. It's hard to make this work well on a carrier without making a total disaster of wires. The design of this also means you can only use one type of radio, making this setup useless if you find you need a DMR or you need to integrate into a team with a different radio setup. And the earpiece, while functional, makes everything kind of crappy. You can hear now, but one ear only hears your radio. The sound being piped in from your ear pro now really only goes to one side. And with our higher end headsets with multi-directional sound, that's now pretty useless. And as I've shown you, high-end multi-directional sound can be insanely useful, from home defense, hunting, tactical use, you name it. It's super useful to have these. So let's take this whole setup up a level and see what we can do next. Here we have a similar setup to the previous connection method, but we use a setup from CommGear Supply that has significant upgrades in its features. Where the pin connects into the radio now has a QD system that you can change radio setups at any time. So then I can just swap in different QD ends to change out my radio and then still have all the antennas and comm gear all set in place. So instead of my basic Beofeng radio, I could then swap in the Alinco DMR and attach the same CAAtail antenna on the carrier. And then use those same QD connections to connect in a DMR radio if you want to monitor some of those nationwide digital channels more discreetly. On the other end of the CommGear supply cord is a 2-pin connector that can also take a 2-pin to 3.5mm adapter. So with the 2-pin connector or the 3.5mm like I have connected, it allows you to connect into like 90% of all commercial available active hearing headsets. So to complete this setup, we simply connect in our basic headsets like Walker Razors, Peltors, or even high-end Sordin Supreme Pro X's. And now we have our first setup where everything is actually fully integrated. Our radio connects into our mic setup, and then our mic setup actually routes directly into our active hearing headset. The QDs on the end of the radio allow us to connect into a variety of radio setups, and the whole setup integrates our comms with independent volume control of both the radio and the headset. So let's do a pros and cons of this setup. So for the first pro, you get your multi-directional hearing back and your team comms remain discreet. Much like our previous setup, others can't hear our team's communication, but we can also hear all the sounds from our headset and not lose out on the multi-directional capabilities of our headset. And another just massive pro, it all works together. Having everything integrated cleanly just makes the whole system one functional loop with all your equipment working in unison. So then what are the cons of a setup like this? Well, the first one is the QDs and the overall cost. While it's useful, the QD attachments are proprietary, and you gotta buy all the cords and connections for each bit. So it's not super budget friendly, but I think it's leaps and bounds better than anything else we've seen so far. And for the next con is the microphone and all the cords everywhere. Routing this through a carrier can leave a lot of extra mess if you're a lefty like me and have your mic on one side and your headset connection on the other. Also, the clip for the mic is dying for an upgrade. I struggle a little with how to connect this so it makes sense. I should just remove this clip and use like Ranger bands or something. Anyway though, let's take this whole setup up another level. Here, we'll keep the simple Baofeng radio, but add in a push to talk. Often referred to as a PTT. Now, this is a Kenwood style PTT, which offers a connector that goes directly into our Baofeng radios. And then takes a U94 down lead. So this is a Disco 32 PTT with U94 Kenwood connectors. Now, the U92 is important because that's the down lead that comes from our T headsets in our high threat headset in both the headband and our headset configuration. Here we have our first high threat headset integrated into a Team Wendy QD helmet mount. The microphone is not a separate piece and further simplifies the whole setup. On this style, the microphone uses a fairly stiff wire portion to hold the mic in place. The headset actually uses a submersible microphone, so it still works if you find yourself underwater. No, I didn't test it. The other T headset high threat headset is identical in all features besides the microphone itself. The style is a more common boom mic style and bends around a whole lot easier. One thing about this whole setup also is that you can take this Ear Pro and change it from this headset QD to this headband connection style in like seconds. Just loosen the screws and the headset is released from whichever mounting setup you're using. This adds a lot of versatility to this setup, but I'm also wildly off topic. It doesn't matter which one you use or which style you want to use, you just use the U92 connection to connect into the PTT. Using another U92 PTT that uses a basic 5-pin setup, we can easily integrate into military PRIC 152 radios, giving you the ability to transition into military-style comms if you're finding yourself needing to integrate into those teams. So let's talk about the pros and cons of this setup. So for the first pro, everything integrates so amazingly well. With your radio connecting into a PTT that then goes directly into your headset, you have a simple and easy method to keep your multi-directional hearing and facilitate all your communications and equipment. The use of the PTT with the integrated headset makes team communication easy and rapid to execute. I could probably go on about positives for this setup for days, and I will say this setup means business. It's definitely something I would want to have in like a military duty situation if I was ever in that position, and something I would definitely want to have in like a de-escalating civilian encounter. I would want to have some crazy setup just like this. But let's talk about some of the cons of this setup. Well, one of the cons is that the PTT only connects into one style of radio, and it's not cheap. The end of each PTT has one style of connector, so you can't connect into multiple different radios without buying a different PTT for each radio. And these PTTs are not even remotely cheap, so you definitely have to plan ahead. And the idea of you getting a spare PTT for some made-up scenario where the military has to have you join them and you need to connect into a PRIC 152, yeah, that's a tad silly and probably a big waste of money. But I will say though, another con, the headset and microphone integrated into one setup, yeah, it definitely comes at a cost. As amazing as these T-high-threat headsets are, they are often 3 times the cost of the non-mic integrated version and over 10 times the cost of a more basic range headset that works with a 3.5mm in our previous setup. This is a pinnacle setup with the headset, integrated comms, and the PTT, but you need to weigh if you need this, if your budget can allow it, and if you actually need this level of comm integration in whatever you're actually doing. And I definitely don't, but it's awesome to just do a net check with this thing on. So then with all these options, which one do I recommend to anyone not being issued all of this gear? I find the comm gear supply setup to be the best balance of cost and functionality. And they're nice enough to give a discount code for our viewers. If you're interested in purchasing that setup, I'll also put that discount code down in the description. The ability to connect into multiple different radios easily and also be able to connect into any of the off-the-shelf headset makes it a great way to add a significantly increased comm capability while not breaking the bank. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it doesn't really matter what comm setup you choose if you don't know how to use the radio. While all these setups are neat, they're limited by your level of radio knowledge and how the radio itself operates. Such as if you're operating in an urban environment, it doesn't really matter which radio you use because your range is going to be limited because a lot of the signal is going to be blocked by all the walls that are around you. So knowing your mission set and setting up for it is far more important than how much money you spent on your equipment. Like if you're in a large open field with no repeaters, you want to have your radio set up primarily on a long wavelength so that you can get the max distance for those radio transmissions. And then you may want to set up like a secondary channel that's on a short wavelength that then penetrates those walls easier in an urban environment. We see all this fancy gear on TV and movies and in Instagram posts, but it's the knowledge that makes it useful. I'd be far more dangerous with just a radio than someone with a PTT and headset and integrated comms that has no idea how to use it. So this is my plug to you. Get a cheap radio. A Beofeng is a great place to start learning radios. And when you grow out of it, pass it on to a teammate. And then you have another individual on your team with a higher comms level of knowledge. And that only makes the whole team better. So if the time came where you need to use this equipment and knowledge, you could quickly and easily strategize together. regardless of how much you spend on your setup. And again, remember, I'm not some level 100 wizard behind enemy lines. I'm learning it the same as you are, so hopefully my experience can help you avoid some potential pitfalls and ultimately aid you in how to connect all this stuff up. Those individuals doing high-end military or police duty have their own radios and mission requirements. And the setups I've shown will likely not apply in those situations. So don't look to me for like special forces military tactics. Did legal really say that I have to say that? It seems obvious. I hope this video on the different level of comms was useful and you have a better idea with the pros and cons of each. And hopefully Hop's happy that we expand on his video a little bit. But I want to say thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. You're the ones that make all this possible and I love you for it. And thank all of you that like, comment, and subscribe. Please comment down below which setup you think is the best. All right, everyone, Walsh out. Don't tell anybody I'm using my expander wings. They're gonna get mad.
You're a wizard, Harry!